In February of 1943, a Red Army sergeant pulled a stiff banner from the grip of a frozen SS corpse near Demyansk. The death's head emblem told him immediately. These weren't ordinary Wehrmacht troops. These were concentration camp killers who'd been given armor and artillery. But here's what the textbooks never mention. The moment Soviet command confirmed the identity of the 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf, they issued a single directive. Not capture, annihilation. This is the story of how the Red Army systematically exterminated Hitler's most savage executioners. Theodor Eicke commanded Dachau concentration camp. In 1939, Hitler gave him a new assignment: transform his camp guards into combat soldiers. Not standard infantry, but elite killers. Eicke selected 6,500 men personally. Every one of them had worked inside a death camp. They understood obedience without hesitation. They understood killing without remorse. Now Hitler gave them panzer tanks, heavy artillery, and a singular purpose: terrorize everything in their path. Their helmets bore a grinning skull called the Totenkopf, which means death's head. Even fellow German soldiers avoided them. These men operated differently. One Wehrmacht captain noted in his journal, "The SS Totenkopf execute prisoners and finish off the wounded. Our own troops are frightened of them." In Poland, September 1939, they demonstrated their methods. In Włocławek, they herded entire families into wooden structures and set them ablaze. In Płock, they executed 300 unarmed civilians by firing squad against a stone wall. A survivor named Stanisław Kowalczyk lay beneath the corpses for 6 hours. He could hear them joking between volleys. He could hear them celebrating. These weren't military operations. This was entertainment. Franz Kipf served in the division, and his personal diary survived the conflict. His November 1939 entry read, "Today we cleansed a Polish settlement. The village priest dropped to his knees begging. I executed him inside his own church. His parishioners followed." By 1940, every military force in Europe recognized the skull emblem. Eicke had manufactured precisely what the Führer demanded: troops who relished murder, troops who obeyed any command, and troops who would commit unspeakable acts without question. But these former camp guards had only brutalized defenseless prisoners and civilians. They'd never encountered an opponent capable of fighting back. When Operation Barbarossa launched on June 22, 1941, 3 million German troops flooded into Soviet territory. The Totenkopf division spearheaded the slaughter. They carried explicit instructions: the Commissar order, liquidate every Soviet political officer, liquidate every Communist Party official, liquidate every Jew, make entire populations submit through terror. At Brest-Litovsk, they publicly shot 200 Soviet administrators while forcing families to witness. At Minsk, they incinerated the Jewish district. 3,000 dead in 24 hours. They documented everything with photographs. They felt no shame. Near Lozitsa in September 1941, they captured 200 surrendering Soviet troops. The prisoners had discarded their weapons and raised empty hands. The Totenkopf arranged them along a trench and opened fire with automatic weapons. Dmitry Petrov observed from nearby woodland. He was injured and concealed in the brush. "They weren't soldiers," he testified afterward. "Soldiers accept surrenders. These were executioners. They slaughtered my comrades like animals, some still breathing. The SS walked among the bodies, putting bullets in skulls." The most horrific crime occurred at Babi Yar, outside Kyiv, on September 29th and 30th, 1941. The Totenkopf participated in murdering 33,771 Jewish men, women, and children across 48 hours. Victims were forced to undress, then marched to a ravine's edge and machine-gunned into the gorge. But Soviet eyes were watching. The NKVD, Stalin's secret police, began compiling comprehensive records. Every atrocity, every razed settlement, and every slaughtered prisoner. They recorded individual names. They sketched the skull insignia. They were building a case for vengeance. NKVD operative Pavel Sudoplatov penetrated German-held territory. His dispatches to Moscow contained precise intelligence. Totenkopf Division positively identified by Death's Head markings. Current position, Sector 7. Documented crimes. Systematic civilian murder and prisoner executions. Recommendation, grant no quarter upon capture. Winter arrived early in 1941. Temperatures plummeted to -40. The Totenkopf established defensive positions, confident in their conquests. They'd murdered thousands. They believed victory was certain. They miscalculated badly. The Red Army had reorganized, and crucially, they now understood precisely who opposed them. Every Soviet soldier heard the accounts, the death camp operators, the infant killers, the ones displaying skulls on their helmets. Lieutenant Mikhail Voronov was a Soviet officer whose brother had been executed at Lozitsa. He wrote home to his wife, "I've identified their markings. The skull. When I spot it, I don't recognize soldiers. I recognize butchers. We'll repay them exactly as they treated our people, with nothing." January 8, 1942. Soviet forces encircled 100,000 Germans near Demyansk. The Totenkopf Division was caught in the trap. The Soviets possessed exact intelligence on SS unit locations. Their artillery received explicit targeting priorities. Focus all fire on positions displaying Death's Head insignia. Constant shelling with no pauses for casualty evacuation. For 105 consecutive days, ordnance rained on Totenkopf positions hourly. Soviet sharpshooters earned rewards for SS trophies. Return with a Death's Head helmet badge and receive bonus vodka. Return with SS collar insignia and earn family visitation leave. Temperatures reached -45. German transport aircraft couldn't land. The Totenkopf consumed their horses first, then their dogs, then boiled leather from their boots. Men's extremities blackened with frostbite. Field surgeons amputated limbs using handsaws. No anesthesia was available. Heinrich Wille was a division survivor who later documented, "The Russians knew our identity. Our casualties simply vanished. Other Wehrmacht units could negotiate prisoner swaps. Never us. Wearing the Death's Head guaranteed your death." Ivan Petrov was a Soviet marksman positioned inside the pocket. He tallied 31 confirmed eliminations. Every target wore SS insignia. "Each round was retribution," he recorded. "The SS burned my village to ash. My parents perished in the flames. Every dead Totenkopf soldier represented justice delivered." By May 1942, when the encirclement finally collapsed, the Totenkopf had suffered 7,000 casualties, more than half their original force. Survivors resembled walking corpses. Their immaculate black uniforms had become tatters, but replacements arrived. Fresh conscripts who'd never served in concentration camps. These new troops believed they could distance themselves from the unit's infamy. They believed incorrectly. The Soviets possessed total recall. Red Army patrols began discovering Totenkopf captives executed with single gunshots to the skull base. Not accidentally, systematically murdered. Soviet commanders ignored the killings. Some actively endorsed them. General Volkov addressed his troops directly. "The SS aren't legitimate combatants. They're convicted criminals. Process them appropriately." July 5, 1943. Hitler initiated Operation Citadel. The Totenkopf Division would lead the southern offensive. They deployed 140 armored vehicles, including fearsome Tiger tanks. They considered themselves invincible. The Soviets had prepared extensively. They possessed advance warning of the assault. More critically, they knew the Totenkopf's exact attack corridor. Marshal Zhukov issued precise commands. SS Totenkopf will advance through Prokhorovka. Concentrate maximum artillery on grid reference 237. Upon their advance, achieve complete destruction. July 12th. The ambush triggered. Totenkopf armor advanced directly into history's largest tank engagement. But this wasn't random combat. The Soviets had designated every SS vehicle as a priority kill. Sergeant Mikhail Petrov commanded a T-34. He spotted the Death's Head painted on a Tiger's turret. That skull ignited something in me. he documented. My gunner placed 3 rounds into it. The tank burned for hours. We heard the crew's screams. We offered no assistance. Within 72 hours, the Totenkopf lost 70 tanks, half their armored strength erased. 4,000 personnel were killed or wounded. Their offensive disintegrated entirely. Artillery Captain Yuri Bondarev observed through field glasses. We watched the SS withdrawing, leaving their wounded behind. We maintained continuous fire. No compassion for the compassionless. German signals intelligence intercepted the communications. One Totenkopf officer transmitted. Receiving concentrated bombardment. Enemy knows our precise coordinates. Request immediate withdrawal authorization. Headquarters responded. Negative. Maintain current position. His final broadcast was simply, position compromised. A captured Totenkopf sergeant told his interrogators, "You singled us out deliberately. Regular Wehrmacht formations beside us received standard fire. We absorbed everything you possessed. You intended our elimination." The Soviet officer answered, "We have documented evidence of your actions in occupied territories. Every community, every mass burial site. Yes, we intended your elimination." Following Kursk, the Totenkopf never mounted another offensive. Only withdrawal remained. The predators had become prey. The Red Army would pursue them across a continent, all the way to Berlin itself. August 1943. The Totenkopf fled westward across Ukraine, down the identical highways they'd triumphantly traveled in 1941, through the identical villages they'd reduced to cinders. Now Soviet armor hunted them relentlessly. Every kilometer of retreat exacted a blood price. The Red Army uncovered mass burial sites continuously. Katyn Forest, 4,000 Polish military officers with execution wounds to the head. Vinnytsia, 9,000 Ukrainian civilians in excavated pits. Each revelation intensified Soviet fury. Captain Viktor Suborov's unit liberated a settlement near Kharkov. They discovered 300 corpses stuffed into a water well, women and children. Suborov assembled his soldiers and said, "The SS perpetrated this. The ones displaying skull emblems. Effective immediately. Accept no SS surrenders. That's a direct command." January 1944. The Korsun pocket. Another encirclement. The Totenkopf found themselves trapped again, alongside 60,000 additional German troops. Soviet loudspeakers operated continuously, day and night. Wehrmacht personnel, you may surrender safely. SS personnel, you will be eliminated. For 14 days, Soviet bombardment converted the pocket into a wasteland of mud and carnage. When German forces attempted breakouts, the Soviets permitted regular army columns to pass, then sealed the corridor when SS formations approached. February 17th, the pocket disintegrated. Soviet forces encountered 800 Totenkopf soldiers attempting surrender. By sunrise, all 800 lay dead. Single gunshots to the skull. Death's head badges carved from their uniforms as souvenirs. Hans Müller was a Wehrmacht officer who survived to describe the aftermath. The Russians separated SS from regular forces. We were transported to detention facilities. The SS were escorted into the forest. We heard automatic weapons fire. None of them returned. The division continued its westward flight through Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. At every frontier, they abandoned equipment behind. Tanks without fuel, artillery without ammunition, soldiers without hope. By December 1944, merely 4,000 Totenkopf troops remained from an original 20,000. They'd sustained 80% casualties. The skull adorning their helmets had transformed into a death warrant. Soviet units would identify that insignia and request artillery barrages simply to eliminate a solitary SS soldier. Private Wilhelm Hoffmann composed his final correspondence home. Type points desperate. Intensity high. The Russians track our every movement. Resistance fighters report our locations constantly. We can't even retrieve our fallen. The death's head signifies nothing now except our own approaching end. December 1944. The final organized Totenkopf formations became trapped within Budapest. Stalin demanded the city's capture regardless of cost. He appended specific instructions. The SS Totenkopf occupies this city. Permit no survivors. For 50 days, Soviet artillery methodically reduced Budapest to rubble. They concentrated fire on structures sheltering SS units specifically. Soviet loudspeakers announced Totenkopf atrocities in German throughout the siege. You incinerated our villages. You murdered our prisoners. You slaughtered our children. Now payment comes due. Inside the besieged city, Totenkopf soldiers wasted away. They consumed rats. They drank radiator fluid. Frostbite claimed fingers and toes. Medical supplies were exhausted. Men died from septic wounds. Corporal Ernst Wagner maintained a journal. The Russians refuse our capitulation. Other formations can negotiate terms. We cannot. They observe our insignia and immediately fire. We're already deceased. Our bodies simply haven't acknowledged it. February 13th, 1945. Budapest capitulated. Of 1,000 Totenkopf soldiers defending the city, fewer than 30 escaped. The remainder died in combat or faced execution following capture. Survivors fled westward toward Austria. They incinerated their SS documentation. They ripped away their insignia. Some stripped uniforms from Wehrmacht corpses, anything to conceal their true identities. Soviet intelligence maintained surveillance. Partisan networks transmitted every SS movement. Radio Moscow broadcasted, "The war criminals of the Totenkopf division cannot evade justice. We possess their names. We possess their photographs. Retribution will locate them." April 1945. The surviving 500 Totenkopf soldiers made their terminal stand outside Vienna. Soviet forces completed their encirclement. No avenue of retreat existed. Commanding officer Helmuth Becker confronted two options: surrender to Soviet forces and accept guaranteed execution, or resist until complete annihilation. He selected a third alternative. On May 8, 1945, Becker guided his remaining troops westward and capitulated to American forces. He understood Americans would imprison him, Soviets would bury him, yet escape remained impossible. Soviet. Authorities demanded the Americans transfer all SS detainees. Some were surrendered. Those men vanished into Soviet detention systems, and few ever emerged. The 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf began operations with 40,000 personnel. Fewer than 1,000 outlived Soviet imprisonment. A 97% mortality rate. That's the highest casualty percentage of any German military formation. They believed the skull emblazoned on their helmets projected terror. It accomplished that. It simultaneously designated them for extermination. Every Red Army soldier recognized that insignia instantly. Every partisan could pinpoint their coordinates. Every forward observer could direct strikes on their emplacements. Theodor Eicke, who forged the division, died in 1943 when Soviet aircraft destroyed his transport. They recovered his remains bearing the death's head emblem. They abandoned his corpse to decompose. Hermann Priess, a division commander, was captured by Americans, prosecuted for war crimes, and sentenced to 2 decades imprisonment. He gained release after only 5 years. Soviet officials protested vehemently. They demanded execution. The survivors who reached Germany never discussed their service. They concealed their SS tattoos. They destroyed their photographs. They assumed false identities. They understood Soviet intelligence maintained permanent records. Even decades afterward, they still feared unexpected visitors. In 1965, 20 years following the war's conclusion, former Totenkopf soldier Johann Neumann was discovered deceased in Argentina. Single gunshot to the skull. Execution methodology. Local investigators found Soviet currency inside the killer's abandoned vehicle. The case remained permanently unsolved. The death's head insignia they displayed with such arrogance became their condemnation. It identified them as Hitler's most devoted fanatics. It simultaneously marked them for methodical annihilation by an enemy possessing infinite patience and absolute memory. The Soviets transformed the hunters into the hunted. They employed the Totenkopf's own tactics against them: savagery, zero mercy, and total destruction. The concentration camp guards, who became armored soldiers, discovered what happens when your enemy determines you deserve no survival. The skull and crossbones was designed to horrify their victims. Ultimately, it served as prophecy, not for those they murdered, but for themselves. If this story captivated you, hit subscribe for more untold World War II histories delivered weekly. Thanks for watching.